Welcome to this Rochester Sentinel webcast. I'm Editor Bill Wilson. Today we're talking with Joe Donnelly, who represents Fulton County in the U.S. Congress. He is a conservative Blue Dog Democrat. Congressman, can you give us a status report on the health reform debate? Where are we right now?
Sure. There is expected a vote possibly within the next month. And I have said from the start, my preference was to do it in pieces, to do things that made sense to folks from the 2nd District in Indiana, things like being able to take your health insurance from one job to another, eliminating the antitrust exemption for health insurance companies. That's something we actually voted on about a week ago, and it passed by a vote of approximately 409 to 16. And that is actually in the overall big bill, that provision about antitrust exemption, but being part of the big bill, it's hard to get done. When they stand alone, we can actually get these things accomplished, which make healthcare more affordable and more available to citizens. Things like eliminating, stopping insurance companies from not covering people with pre-existing conditions. If you have a pre-existing condition like diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis, we're hoping to make coverage available for those kind of things. So the overall health care plan or bill, what is on the table right now is the Senate bill. And it would be up to the House to vote yes or no on the Senate bill. And that may well happen in the next month or two.
Several congressmen have been on the airwaves this week objecting to health care reform legislation that, in their view, would expand abortions in this country. Charmaine Yost is president and CEO of Americans United for Life. She says, and I quote, "The legislation most likely to move forward in Congress would be the single greatest expansion of abortion since the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision." Is that true?
Well, here's the problem with the Senate bill, is that from my reading of it, it does permit federal funding for abortion-related services in the Senate bill as it stands today. And so that is a fatal flaw in my opinion. Because of that language that's in the bill today, I would not vote for the bill.
So that might kill it. Is that got the potential to kill it?
It does have the potential to kill that bill, yes.
Could you explain the Hyde Amendment to us and how that might affect this legislation?
Sure. The Hyde Amendment was the legislation that previously has been in place for approximately 30 years, right in that neighborhood. And Congressman Henry Hyde and Congressman Jim Oberstar from Minnesota worked very closely on that. Congressman Oberstar still happens to be in Congress, and we worked closely with him on trying to craft abortion-related language for the first House bill. And there was put in that language called the Stupak Amendment, and it was very close to the Hyde Amendment, and that's after a Congressman Bart Stupak from Michigan. And what the Hyde Amendment does is it prevents federal funds from being used for any abortion-related services. And so that's the kind of language that we were hoping would be in the Senate bill as well.
Is there in the House any legislation that would finance abortion? Are we talking about financing abortions or just helping the process?
What we're talking about is if a person is to receive abortion-related services and there's a public option or there's health insurance available that the government partially pays for, it cannot have abortion-related services in that health package. And that was how the language in the House bill, the original House bill was, is that there'd be no funding for abortion-related services. We have not accomplished, or I'm not from the Senate, so the Senate bill that passed did not make that separation.
Do you get the sense that that might be stripped from the bill in conference committee or something?
I don't know what their plans are on that, because what has been discussed is the House voting on the Senate bill exactly as it is. And as of right now, that bill still has the portion in there that permits funding of abortion-related services.
How many votes might that cost?
A significant number.
And that, what's a significant? What, I know
It might well be enough to not enable the bill to pass. And my goal with health care has always been to provide health care and to make sure that also whatever health care is provided actually reduces the deficit. Because anybody who says, well, we're just not going to do anything in connection with health care, the problem with that theory is a number of things. Number one, we have an unsustainable cost burden with Medicare, and as we look down the road in 10, 15 years, healthcare costs overwhelm the federal budget, that there's not enough funds to cover everything, the deficit would explode. And so we have to make decisions in the healthcare area as we move forward. I suggested last year, let's do 2 or 3 things as we were discussing that create confidence in the people of Indiana, the people of this country. Make sure that those are successful, then do another 2 or 3 things. So it is not whether we do healthcare reform or whether we don't change anything at all. It is, how do we do this healthcare reform? And if this bill is not successful, then healthcare reform will happen in another way.
Can you give us an overview of the recession in Indiana's 2nd Congressional District and what you see on the horizon?
Sure. The recession actually hit us earlier than a lot of the rest of the country because of, for instance, Elkhart County, where so many recreational vehicles are built, and we're very lucky to have Elkhart as part of the district. But when Wall Street speculators bid up the price of petroleum products, diesel, gasoline, when diesel went over $4 and to $4.50 a gallon, it made it very, very difficult to sell motorhomes or towables. And so we almost saw a devastation of that industry, which collapsed the employment in Elkhart County. And then down in the southern part of our district, in Howard County, we saw the same thing happen as gasoline prices went up. It made it more difficult to sell certain Chrysler models, so transmissions, less were built, and across the street, less were built at the Delphi plant in terms of electronic products. Then, again, Wall Street. It is amazing the impact that the greed and the callousness and the lack of caring about their fellow citizens in this country, what those Wall Street bankers and investment bankers and strategists did to this country. When they put in place the system that caused such a crisis for us, it collapsed lending in this country. And so we saw that lending was not available, people were not buying cars, people were not buying homes, and so we saw a dramatic reduction in the sale of automobiles and similar products. So unemployment went way up down in Howard County as well. And that lack of lending and lack of confidence is what continued to cause our economy to struggle. Now, we were higher to start with than the rest of the country, but what's happened is our unemployment has started to come down while it was like this, where the rest of the country was here before and we were here. Now the rest of the country has come up and we've started to come down. So we're much closer to the national average, and we hope to continue to drop. Howard County at one time was 19% unemployment. It is down around 12.5% right now. Elkhart was at 18.9%. It was down to 14.4%. None of these numbers are good. We're not going to be happy until everyone who wants a job has a job. But we are heading in a better direction than we were. We see RV shipments going up over 25% right now. We see much more stabilization down in Howard County, and we see Delphi going with a $180 million expansion of their plant. That's good for all of us. Our economy in Fulton County, where there are job shops that ship to the medical implement companies in Warsaw, foundries that ship down to our automotive and recreational vehicle companies, growth for these RV companies, the medical implement companies, the auto companies are all good for our Fulton County businesses.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay.